Testing, testing, test. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10. Test. Testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Testing. Test. 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing. Test. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Testing. Test. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 10.
No, you're right, man. Let's test the audio, make sure. Are you ready for the testing? Check, check. 1, 2, check. Josh, the podium microphone green light doesn't work. It doesn't.
Oh, yeah, the room that you're in, you're in coastal, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Coastal, okay.
Courtney made it, or they made it so that you have to do it from the tent, but
Oh, so
it's always on. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You got me? Okay, cool. All right, thank you. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Good? Paulo hit the wrong button. Mute.
Test one, test one. Test one, test one. Test one, test one. Yep. Oh, no.
Oh, wait, could hear. How about now?
Test, test, test.
So besides your Zoom, go to your Zoom real quick.
Test, test, test. Test one, two, three, four.
Oh, my God.
Oh,
Sure, you'll always have to turn that on.
this?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Hello, okay.
Screen light on?
Yes, sir. Okay. Good afternoon, good afternoon. What?
Go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Shirley Rosalilla, and I will be taking you through the staff presentation portion of this public hearing. The proposed regulations. Oh, the proposed regulations will establish criteria for on-site treatment of non-potable water for non-potable reuse. To start, I will introduce briefly what we mean by.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. So. 1 o'clock, we're gonna change those signs.
Test 1, 2.
Call me on the phone or text, or I'll text you, you know. Check 1, 2, 3. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8.
Sorry to interrupt. Randy, could you, test your, sit and like, just test if you're happy with your.
Okay.
The way
Go ahead and count
sound.
to 20, please.
You want me to count to 20? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
That's gonna be your speaking presentation voice.
You're good with that?
Ye-
or-
Oh, yeah, I'll make sure that I don't, because I actually kind of talk loud, so I'll try to move it back a little bit so I'm not super booming.
I could change your output on here also. I mean, you did sound okay, but it sounded like you might be more, let's see.
Yeah, I'm used to talking real loud. Okay,
Go ahead.
so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that's better because I'm not going to talk louder than that. And I'll gauge it. If I hear it's too loud, I'll
Yeah.
tone
And
back.
just FYI, if we're selected on, if this doesn't change, you can lower yourself by this. It's very, since you got to keep your hand on it and see
Yeah.
the blue lighting going.
Okay.
Okay, and then, we'll adjust it. Okay, we'll adjust the sheet.
I think it's going to be better if I stand anyway. Test, test. Test, test.
Test, test.
All right, it's 1 o'clock, so we're going to get started. I hope everybody can find a seat if you have to crowd in. Okay, so thank you for showing up today, this afternoon, for our on-site treated and reuse of non-potable water public hearing. So I have a few things to read. So I'm going to read them off this sheet because I need to make sure I say them the right way. So the Division of Drinking Water has proposed the regulations for on-site treatment and reuse of non-potable water, establishing a statewide risk-based water quality standard for on-site treatment and reuse of non-potable water sources for non-potable end uses in multifamily, residential, commercial, and mixed building uses. That's a tongue twister there. The purpose of today's public hearing is to receive public comments regarding the proposed regulations. So, some housekeeping. In the event of an emergency, Please exit the room through the double doors at the back, take the grand stairs down to the first floor, and at the bottom of the stairs, stay to the right. Cross the street, and we'll meet you across the street at the Cesar Chavez Park. Once the alarms are cleared and it's safe to return, then we'll reconvene back in the room to continue the hearing. So today, your presenters are going to be me, although very short. I'm only going to talk for a couple minutes. I am Randy Barnard. I'm the Technical Operations Section Chief with Division of Drinking Water. But your main presenter today will be Shirley Rosalella. She's a senior staff person with us. She's our expert on the on-site reuse, and she's the lead on these regulations. So the agenda for today is we're going to open it up with a staff presentation. We're going to walk through some of the background and history. Then we're going to take a 10-minute break, or if it's a little bit longer, basically we'll start back up at 1:45 for the public comments. And then we'll run the public hearing until all the comments have been heard. So please understand that today's public hearing is an opportunity for you, the public, to provide comments on the regulations at this public hearing. The State Water Board will respond to all of your comments in subsequent regulation documents, which will be made available to the public on our website. The goal for regulatory adoption by the State Board is to have these done by December 31st of this year. But it may vary depending on whether comments lead to revisions to these proposed regulations. If revisions are made, the public will have another opportunity to comment on those revisions. So if you'd like to submit a comment in writing regarding these proposed regulations, they must be submitted to the board clerk no later than tomorrow at noon on Friday, May 9th. And you can do that by following the instructions that were provided in the March 21st Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. Now, today we'll be taking oral comments, and they'll be recorded by our court reporter, and those will be included also in our final documents. And if you do have written comments, if you could write those down and you could give them to one of the two whose hands are up in the back, you can hand them to them, and then they'll give them to me after the break. All right? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shirley.
Thank you, Randy. Good afternoon. My name is Shirley Rosalella, and I will be taking you through the staff presentation portion of this public hearing. The proposed regulations will establish criteria for on-site treatment of non-potable water for non-potable reuse. But to start, I will introduce briefly what we mean by on-site treated non-potable water systems. And the driver for these proposed regulations is to fulfill the State Board's portion of the statutory mandate, which I will provide an overview of. We developed the regulations to be responsive of our charge in the statutes, and that is reflected in the slide outlining the purpose of the regulations. I will then go into selected regulatory elements from the draft regulation text, and finally, I will wrap the presentation portion of with our anticipated rulemaking schedule, regulation effective date, and what happens after we complete the rulemaking. So this figure is from the San Francisco PUC's on-site water reuse program page, and it shows how various non-potable water sources are generated or collected on site. And here you can see that gray water and black water are collected on site from plumbing fixtures. So that's washing machines, toilets, bathtubs, and dishwashers, and other non-potable waters collected on site, such as rainwater is collected from roof structures, stormwater is collected from at or below grade surfaces, and foundation drainage is collected from dewatering. The non-potable water sources are collected, treated, and used on site for non-potable uses, and these projects are building scale projects, which can be a single or multi-buildings. The on-site treated non-potable water systems is not new. There are existing state regulations addressing the use of alternate water sources for non-potable water applications in California Plumbing Code. Chapter 15 contains existing requirements for on-site treated non-potable gray water systems, and Chapter 16 addresses non-potable rainwater catchment and water quality standards for reuse. An implementation of CPC is primarily by local jurisdictions through issuance of construction or building permits. Senate Bill 966 on on-site treated non-potable water systems was adopted into law in 2018 and codified in the California Water Code as sections 13558 and 13558.1. And this is the portion of the state board's mandate. It's what you see on the screen. So the Water Code requires that state board, in consultation with the California Building Standards Commission and the Department of Housing Community Development, to adopt regulations for risk-based water quality standards for the on-site treatment and reuse of non-potable water for non-potable end uses in multifamily residential, commercial, and mixed-use buildings by December 1st, 2022. And within 12 months of state board adopting the regulations, HCD, in consultation with the state board, must adopt corresponding building standards to support the state board regulations. The statute requires that the proposed regulations address these 5 elements. First one is risk-based log reduction targets for removal of pathogens for non-potable water sources and non-potable end uses. Second is water quality monitoring requirements. Third is reporting requirements for the water quality monitoring results. Fourth is notification and public information requirements. And lastly, cross-connection controls. The statutes provide an exemption for untreated gray water systems and untreated rainwater systems. Untreated gray water systems that are used exclusively for subsurface irrigations that are regulated by Chapter 15 of the CPC are exempt. And so are untreated rainwater systems that are used exclusively for surface, subsurface, or drip irrigation that are regulated by Chapter 16 of the California Plumbing Code. The state board's mandate is to adopt regulations for on-site reuse and to adopt its incorporation into the building standards. We do not have the authority to permit on-site reuse systems. The statutes grant implementation authority primarily to the local jurisdictions, and it's defined in the statute as city, county, or city and county. And this is consistent with the current approach for permitting alternate water source systems. On-site reuse is optional for local jurisdictions to implement. And the statutes require that to permit on-site reuse systems, local jurisdiction must establish local program through adoption of local ordinance. The full requirements for local jurisdiction program is contained in the statutes, but there are 2 items of note. The first one is that local jurisdictions that do not provide water and sewer services must consult with water and sewer utilities to ensure significant adverse impacts to utility systems and programs or receiving waters are avoided. The second is that the permitting program must be robust. It must include establishment of on-site reuse system design criteria, permitting, cross-connection control, and enforcement procedures, and that the program must be implemented for the protection of public health. The statutes assign the state board with a limited set of roles. The state board is prohibited from administering local jurisdiction's program if the local jurisdiction is unable to effectively implement its program or if it decides to terminate the program. The state board must collect annual reports from local jurisdictions. The information required would include information on how the program is operating, and that information would be such as number and location of new and replacement systems, types and quantity of source waters, and how much of those going into end uses, and a summary of any violations and corrective actions that are taken. The proposed regulations will establish criteria for treatment of non-potable waters for non-potable reuse that is protective of public health. It is written to address primarily building scale installations in urban settings that have existing utility services and are subject to local jurisdiction oversight. And these proposed regulations are intended to not overlap with the current framework of California non-potable reuse regulations in Title 22. Existing non-potable reuse regulations in Title 22 focus on treatment and reuse requirements for municipal wastewater sources, and also used to address decentralized domestic wastewater recycling. And these activities are generally implemented through permits issued by the regional water quality control boards. So these proposed regulations would fill some regulatory gap within the statewide recycling criteria, since these regulations would provide criteria for non-potable sources beyond domestic wastewater. And generally, the disposal from these systems are directly into community sewer systems and are not regulated by the regional board's permits. And now we would look into some elements from the regulation text. So we'll look at definition of on-site treated non-potable water system, types of untreated alternate water sources, types of uses, risk-based pathogen log reduction targets, treatment trains, and opportunistic pathogen control. An on-site treated non-potable water system that would be subject to the proposed regulations is a system that collects and treats source waters on site, distributes the treated water for use on site for non-potable purposes, connects to the community sewer system as its only means for discharge of waste. And the untreated alternate water sources that would be addressed in the regulations are on-site wastewater, which is commingled black water and gray water, and then gray water, which is defined in the Health and Safety Code, stormwater, which is precipitation runoff that flows over land or impervious surfaces, including runoffs from roofs with public access, and roof runoff, which is precipitation runoff that is collected directly from roofs not subject to public access. Allowed uses within the regs are categorized into two types, indoor uses and outdoor uses. Indoor uses include toilet flushing, urinal flushing, drain trap priming, and clothes washing. And for outdoor uses, they include ornamental plant and landscape irrigation, dust suppression, decorative fountain, and car washing. So the pathogen log reduction targets in the regulations are risk-based standards, and they are required in the regulations to reduce concentration of pathogens in the source waters to acceptable levels for reuse. The pathogen log reduction targets are derived using quantitative microbial risk assessment, which is a risk assessment approach for estimating human health risk from exposure to pathogens. So what you see on the screen here is a set of pathogen log reduction targets that we are proposing for the regulations. As you can see, for each source, we have two sets of LRTs, one for indoor use and one for outdoor use. So for example, on-site wastewater that's treated and delivered for toilet flushing, which is an indoor use, the required pathogen log reduction set is 8 logs reduction of virus, 6 logs reduction of Giardia, and 5.5 log reduction of Cryptosporidium. We did not start from scratch to come up with the LRTs. In 2017, the Water, Environment, and Reuse Foundation published a set of LRTs in the risk-based framework for the development of public health guidance for decentralized non-potable water systems. The State Board established an expert panel for the purpose of regulation development, which has substantial overlap with the 2017 risk-based framework authors. And we asked the panel to revisit the LRTs that they recommended in 2017 and confirm if there are any additional or new scientific data that would inform or warrant an update. Our panel recommended a new set of LRTs based on a recent California wastewater pathogen data. A summary of the panel effort is published in the Journal of Water and Health, which is a peer-reviewed journal, in October 2022. Separately, as required by the Health and Safety Code Section 57004, the scientific basis of the criteria also went through the external scientific peer review process. So on we go to treatment trains. The proposed regulations require that the pathogen log reductions to be achieved by a properly operated treatment trains. And there are two options for how to comply with the requirement. The first option is by selecting one of the preset treatment trains provided in the regulations, which we call pathogen control treatment trains. And these trains come with prescribed operational limits and generally consist of combination of membrane bioreactor, membrane filtration, UV disinfection, and chlorination. The second option is by proposing an alternative treatment train, and this is meant to be a catch-all of all other treatment trains that include processes or limits other than the specified pathogen control treatment train. The proposed regulations would have a separate set of requirements associated with approval of alternative treatment train, which is necessary to demonstrate that an alternative provides at least an equal degree of public health protection. And both types of treatment trains, both pathogen control and alternative treatment trains, must be capable of continuous process verification monitoring to confirm that the required LRTs are always met. The last regulation element I will go over is the requirement to control opportunistic pathogen. And what we mean by this is to control regrowth in the storage and distribution systems. The proposed regulations would require temperature control on storage and distribution systems, and that disinfectant residual is maintained at farthest end use fixtures. Ongoing monitoring will be required in the form of continuous monitoring of temperature in storage tanks and weekly monitoring of disinfectant residual. So now we're on to the schedule slide, and this is our anticipated rulemaking schedule. Again, reminder that public comments are due tomorrow on Friday at noon. And please refer to the notice proposed action document on how to submit comments. We will have another slide reminder at the end of the hearing on how to do this as well. So we published our notice in the California Notice Register on March 21st, and today is our APA public hearing. Our public comment period starts when the notice was published on March 21st and will end tomorrow on May 9th. And again, as Randy mentioned, our state board adoption goal is December 31st, 2025. And once we start rulemaking, we have 12 months to complete, and that places our rulemaking deadline by March 21st of 2026. Once the rulemaking package is complete, the state board will submit to Office of Administrative Law, and OAL's review of the rulemaking package is 30 calendar days. The state board regulations will be effective once approved by OAL and filed with the Secretary of State. Local jurisdictions can adopt local ordinance for their programs that include the state board standards upon the regulation's effective date. So what happens beyond state board rulemaking? Within 12 months of state board adoption, the Department of Housing and Community Development, in consultation with the state board, must adopt corresponding building standards to support state board regulations. If we meet our schedule as planned, we are expecting the regulations to be ready for the 2027 triennial code adoption cycle. And that concludes my presentation. And I think in the agenda, we say that the public comments will take a break. It would be a 25-minute break now.
Yeah.
And we'll start the public comment at 1:45. So if you have a comment card, please provide it to designated state board staff. They raise their hands. And then at 1:45, we will call your name to the front to provide your comments. Thank you.
All right, we're going to get started again. We'll open up with the public comment portion. Looks like everybody is back, so thank you. The purpose of this hearing is for the public to provide their comments. The State Water Board will respond to all comments in subsequent regulation documents, which will be made available to the public on our website. So today, the oral comments provided during this public hearing will be recorded by a court reporter and then included into our final documents. So when I call your name, please come to the front and then clearly state your full name, the entity or organization you're representing. And then if you will or will not be providing written comments also. That way we just have a record if it's only oral or written also. And then we're just asking also that you please keep the comments to 3 minutes, and we'll put you on a timer to help remind you of it. All right. So we'll start out with Greg Thomas, please. You won the lottery for the first one.
Thanks, Randy and Carol, for all your efforts in this. Greg Thomas with.
I'm gonna see if the mic gets turned on. Oh, there we go.
Try though. See.
What's that?
Test, if it's working.
Thanks, Bob.
I'll start over.
You're good to go.
Thanks,
We'll
Randy.
restart your time. How about
Yeah,
that?
that's fine. Thanks, Randy and Cheryl, for all the efforts related to this. Greg Thomas with Elsinore Valley Municipal Water District, and we will be providing some written comments. I think one of the highlights that you've mentioned, and that was part of the regulation, the draft regulations, is all about public health. As a public water and wastewater provider in Southern California, that's what we look at first and foremost is always about public health and what we're doing for our customers and our constituents. So I was glad to see a lot of that. And so my comments are kind of directed. I had an opportunity to tour a small plant in San Francisco on Tuesday. Really impressed with the operators, Epic Clean Tech, and the operator who came from the municipal side was grade 3 and concurred kind of what my comment is on operator certs, that we really need to have licensed operators, certified operators manning these things, because the location in the buildings and what these all do, the technology is very similar to what we're using out there in the public sector. I mean, you got MBRs, UV, microfiltration, chlorinations, chemical systems, especially for the train A's and those black water. So you're really looking at smaller public or smaller wastewater treatment plants that I think really need to look at having those certified operators, because it's all about public health. The one mishap, and we're sending this whole process and other thing back 20, 25 years, same thing we look at in water reuse. So in that regards, cross connections, those types of things really need to be looked at again for public health. We kid about it, it's non-potable uses, the toilets, those types of things. But I don't know about you, but I had my young son like to play in the toilet, and dropping stuff in there. Twice now I've taken my toilet off to unclog stuff out of it, and that type of thing. So you got to think about that. And that's where I go back with the aspect more on the log removal targets. I look at indirect potable, which doesn't have a direct contact to humans. It's going through multiple media to get to that point. But this has a direct contact in some cases. And I use the toilet example, either the kids or the dog. So I kind of would look at maybe thinking about the log removal targets associated very more similar to what we may be doing in the IPR. The DPR regs are the potable reuse regs that just got approved here about a year or two ago. So those are based on my comments. I thank you for your efforts in this. I know it's not a easy task. You have a lot of input. And I know that they have a black water system at the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco. I wish I could have seen that, but again, it's an opportunity for things. So thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments. And last but not least, Rosario Cortez, please.
Good afternoon. Rosario Cortez, Manager of Regulatory Affairs for Water Reuse California. Thank you so much for the opportunity to address you today on this draft regulation. As you know, water reuse is committed to effective standards that promote on-site reuse where appropriate and in coordination with municipal wastewater and recycle water operations. This draft reg is the result of SB 966 from 2018. And that bill, we are pleased that it requires the local jurisdictions that do not provide water or sewer services to consult with agencies that do provide it. And this is critical in our view to ensure that there are no adverse impacts to the sewer collection system, planned recycle water projects, existing community scale recycle water systems, or receiving waters. And we will be submitting a formal comment letter tomorrow by noon with specific suggested language on some minor issues. But I wanted to highlight some of those. We are requesting that the inconsistencies with Title 22 be considered. It would be more consistent for the on-site regs to require treatment standards similar to those for Title 22 disinfected tertiary recycled water. Especially given that the on-site regs will include comparable levels of oversight through monitoring and reporting. We do request clarification be added to the reg about whether there will be any requirements for operator training and certification with ongoing operations. And it would be helpful if the reg could clarify, well, who would enforce the water quality standards? So just interested in whether it'll really be only the local jurisdiction or the role for the regional boards. Additionally, SB 966 does list out toilet, urinal flushing, clothes washing, irrigation, and dust suppression as allowable uses. However, the regulation limits the irrigation to ornamental plants and landscape. So we suggest using the same phrase of irrigation in the regulation to line up with existing law. And lastly, the California Plumbing Code does allow for recycled water signs to not be purple. So these signs need to be highly visible and on a contrasting background. So we suggest that the reg align with those requirements in the plumbing code. But thank you so much for your time and this opportunity.
Great, thank you for your comment. All right, last call. Any other comments? Okay, so this slide is for those online on the Zoom call. So if you would like to submit written comments regarding the proposed regulations, they must be submitted to the board clerk no later than noon tomorrow, which is Friday, May 9th. Okay, and with that, thank you for your time, and we're going to call this public hearing to an end. Thank you.